Council. I am Mayor Nathan Box, and I am calling this meeting to order. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd.
Present.
Freeman.
Present.
Peters.
Here.
Corbin.
Here.
Coronado.
Here.
Arnshorst.
Here.
Hoekstra.
Here.
Raymond.
Here.
Mayor Box.
Present.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. We're going to begin this evening, as we have for many years, first with an opening prayer this evening by Councilmember Freeman, followed immediately by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us if you're so inclined.
If you would pray with me, please. Heavenly Father, we come before you this evening at the end of our business day and now pick up our tasks in investing in our very community. And so we would ask for your wisdom, your guidance, and your leadership in opinion and in decision. We ask that you would continue to sustain our community in the way that you have for decades and decades. We thank you for your many blessings. We confess our wrongdoings to you, that you would forgive us. And now we put this meeting before you, that you would lead and guide. And it's by your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Mr. Freeman. Next item on our agenda are our consent agenda items. These are items that are considered to be fairly routine. They've been reviewed by the council as part of our council packet, and they will be enacted in one motion unless a member of the public or a member of council asks to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed in its regular order on the regular agenda. But before I ask that, Kathy, would you please review the consent agenda for us?
4B, approval of minutes, August 2nd, 2023 regular meeting and August 9th, 2023 study session. 4C, oaths of office. 4D, written petitions and communications, speculative IFT, Lakeshore Industrial Properties, 766 East 48th Street. 4E, Holland Board of Public Works, electric distribution easements for Washington Boulevard, electric distribution construction. 4F, Holland Board of Public Works, declaration of surplus material. 4G, City Clerk, claims filed against the city. 4H, City Clerk, early voting, Ottawa County Clerk, approval of agreement. 4I, Finance, May financial reports. 4J, Finance, approved purchase of 3 2023 Chevy Silverado pickup trucks. 4K, Finance, declare fire division items as surplus. 4L, Finance, logo, branding, and a website design development for downtown Holland and the Holland Farmers Market. 4M, Public Safety Services, purchase replacement of existing accident and crime scene mapping system. 4N, Management and Administrative Services, approval of purchase of station reporting system for the new fire station of Waverly Road from Westnet. 4O, Management Administrative Services, approval of ice rink soil stabilization engineering proposal. 4P, Management Administrative Services, Human Resources, MERS Defined Benefit Plan Amendment and Customized Definition of Compensation Addendum. 4Q, Management Administrative Services, Human Resources, Delegates to Municipal Employees Retirement System Annual Meeting. 4R, Management Administrative Services, Downtown Group, Downtown Development Authority Parking Lot Lease Fee Adjustment.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there any member of the public that would like to have an item removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda? Seeing none. Any member of council that would like to have an item removed from consent and placed on the regular agenda? Ms.
Yes,
Raymond.
Yeah, I'd like to remove items E and O.
So E is the Holland Board of Public Works electric distribution easements, and then that'll be placed at item 12A1. And then the O is the approval of ice rink soil stabilization proposal, and that'll be at 12E6.3. Any other members of council that'd like to remove anything from the consent agenda? Seeing none, what is the pleasure of council in regard to the amended consent agenda?
Move we adopt the consent agenda as amended.
It is moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Byrd,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes?
Peters, Corbin,
Yes.
Coronado,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Wonderful, thank you. Next item on our agenda, item 5, public comment. Under the Open Meetings Act of the State of Michigan, in all of our meetings, both city council and our board, committee, and commission meetings, we allow the public the opportunity to speak and let us know what they believe is important. We do have some guidelines in regard to public comment. One, each person may speak only one time. You're limited to 5 minutes. This is one-way communication, so it's an opportunity for you to speak to us, but we don't engage in discussion or answer specific questions during the public comment period. However, if there is a specific question, then a staff member may be able to reach back out to you after the meeting to provide that answer. Also, typically, there are 3 lights on the dais in front of me. For those people who've been here before, there's a red light, a yellow light, and a green light. But because our very capable assistant city manager is not here this evening to run the timing system for that, we're going to do it the old-fashioned way with our phones to keep track. So it's going to be also up to you as public commenters to keep track of your time, because I will just be letting you know when your time has expired. You won't get that 1-minute warning. We thank you. I stand corrected. We have the opportunity to provide a 1-minute warning from Mr. Van Beek. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Also, when you approach the podium, please state your name and the municipality in which you live. Having said that, is there anyone here who would like to address council at this time? If so, please come forward. And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Yeah, my name is Joe Spalding. I live in Holland Township. I just kind of wanted to give a report out to the board and members of the public as well about the activities of the recall effort on Lucy Ebel, and then also new reasons why it's necessary. We're finding a lot of the activities that are going on at the county commission meetings are involving essentially attempts to freeze out nonprofit organizations, and then also they're looking at relationships with other municipal governments, and that includes the city of Holland. So a lot of what they're going to be doing is going to be intending to essentially weaponize the county government in a way that's extremely dangerous, as well as frankly insulting to huge members of our constituencies on both sides of the bridge. So one of the things that we're doing in the Holland Township is that we do have a high concentration of very walkable turf, and it is a unique opportunity for this recall effort. And recalls in Michigan since 2012 have been notoriously difficult to accomplish. I have a lot of experience running different field campaigns, and this one, I can promise you we're getting ink on paper faster than any petition that I've ever seen in the history of petitions. As long as I've been watching them on this, people are really, really upset about what's going on in our county. And I know that Doug Zylstra is an extraordinary individual. He's one of the kindest people that I know, so he's going to refrain from talking openly about what's happening at county business, but you can watch any meeting, especially interactions with him. And just so you guys know, you guys work on Robert's rules, and there's a lot of courtesy that goes on. Just the committee meeting this past week, Doug was trying to speak briefly before giving a motion, and the chair was Allison Miedema. Joe Moss was not the chair. He is normally the chair of the county commission meetings. He was sitting off to the side, and out of order, he spoke up and kind of like harumphed, and Allison Miedema has demanded at that point that Doug Zylstra, our representative, your representative on the county commission, skip right to his motion. It was one of the rudest things that I've seen from the dais, and that speaks volumes about how the current county commission views the residents of Holland. And so I guess for me, I don't think anyone really understands or recognizes or acts on the danger of shock value politics and working against what kind of damage that type of politics can do to a community. Than me, I know some people that care about it and work on it as hard as I do. But it's really difficult to talk about the current situation without sounding, it's so horrific without sounding that it's just an appeal to shock value. But we do have a new hire, Mr. John Gibbs is the county administrator. He's hired an assistant. The role's never needed an assistant before. They're paying this person an extra $30,000. Again, our tax dollars, a significant portion of the tax base is in the city of Holland. And I'm sorry, the only way I can describe this kid's social media history is he is either the worst, most vile edgelord online, or he is a straight-up Nazi. He's spoken out against conservatives who protect or speak well of police officers, and that's the tip of the iceberg. He's gone off offending every group that you can imagine, and I have some of his tweets, which he's deleted his Twitter account here. I'm hoping I can give them to Keith and have him pass around. I don't need to read these out loud. That's shock value politics, but letting you guys be informed, that's super important for what's going on. It does look, we are in the middle of being challenged for the recall language. It looks like, and we're hoping that that's going to get resolved on the 25th. If that happens, my experience tells me that we're going to be able to get the 2,480 signatures that we need to recall Lucy Ebel, and then there'll be a special election over there on the other side of the bridge. I know it's election season right now, and I mean, we're a really small community, and I don't mean this honestly. I mean this because of how much I care about the community, but we recognize who is showing up and helping out and making sure that Ottawa counties continue to be defined to the resistance against this kind of nonsense instead of whatever it is they have going on at the county level. So is it okay if I pass these up? Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate the time.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Sure. Chris Mashila. I'm an Allegan resident. Actually, I live in Overijssel Township, so I work for the the Allegan County Drain Commissioner right now, and just kind of wanted to get to see what the board was like here and chat with you guys and just see if there's areas that the Drain Commission can improve on or what we can do to help you guys. Being that said, I'm looking at running next year for Drain Commissioner, so just kind of meeting the people and seeing what we can do to help.
Welcome.
I'll just hand you a couple quick business cards.
Actually, if you want to leave those with Mr. Van Beek, he'll make sure that we get them.
That's great.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who would like to address council? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Yes, Jim Story, and I live in the city of Holland, and am the Allegan County Board of Commissioner representative for Holland, Overijssel, Fillmore, Salem, and Lake Town townships. Just wanted to give my county, Allegan County report. First of all, last week, Governor Whitmer appointed Attorney Matthew Antkowiak to the vacancy in our Chief Circuit Court Judge position that was created by the retirement of Judge Kangas. Judge designate Antkowiak will take office, I believe it's August the 28th. He has been practicing law in Allegan County for 25 or maybe even 26 years at this point. And he is a son of Allegan County, grew up there. So we welcome him, and he's been a defense lawyer for those 26 years. Very well-known figure in our courthouse, and I'm sure he'll do a fine job for our residents. The Broadband Action Work Group is awaiting final determination from the state's MyHigh office of our grant application so that we can start construction to provide service to the 12,000 residents, both business and residential, who do not have adequate cell service, or excuse me, broadband service. And Ted Seiler, who on your Board of Public Works, serves on our Broadband Action Work Group. And now that their work is kind of awaiting further action, they've decided to take a stab at fixing some of the holes that we have in self-service in Allegan County. It's pretty predictable when you run around the county areas where if you're in the middle of a call, it'll get dropped. And so, and it's not just an inconvenience factor or irritation, but we did have a fatal drowning over in Green Lake in Layton Township that is directly attributable to the lack of cell service. Person drowned in the middle of the lake because they couldn't summon help. And so it's a very important next step, and I'm glad our volunteer broadband action work group is taking that on. The county, myself and our county administrator, as well as Lakeshore Advantage and the Macataw Area Coordinating Council all submitted public comment on the Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy and EPA's draft designation of Western Allegan County as a air non-attainment area. Our traditional opposition, backed by a former EPA administrator, Carol Browner, is that the air that is tested at the monitoring station on the extreme edge of the county, the extreme western edge, really is monitoring air from Chicago. My ear, nose, and throat guy told me that's the right thing to do. That having worked in Chicago and Milwaukee, he says that's where the prevailing wind is. If they does not get lifted or does not get changed, it could have a very significant effect on our employers, as they may have to retrofit a lot of their air stacks. So cost and of course the industrial might of Holland is in the Allegan County portion. We are working, negotiating with Kent County right now for a role in deciding the use of what's called the Sustainable Business Park, which is a 250-acre site in Door Township, adjacent to the Kent County landfill in Byron Township.
You have 1 minute.
And I will just finish up by saying we will be letting our contract in a month for the reconstruction of our courthouse and our county services building at Dumont Lake, bringing services closer to the people. Our Drain Commission office will be there. So thank you for the time this evening. Good to see you all.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else here who would like to address council? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Good evening. I'm Catherine Ristila Bass of the City of Holland, and I'm the chair of the Human Relations Commission. I'm here to just represent us. Thank you for all your good work. I was listening to last meeting, although I wasn't able to attend in person, and one thing that struck me was all the good work that the City Parks and Rec is doing. I was really pleased to hear the report on Moran Park, and of course all the other good things that make it, that are accessible to everyone in the city, and that's what the Human Relations Department really advocates and desires to support. So I was very glad to hear about that. One thing I had heard personally that made me think that I was thought of during that Moran Park presentation was I've talked to a number of older residents of the city, and I think you'd be surprised to know how many people who had 40, 50, 70-year marriages, whatever, that had met initially at the Moran Park ice rink on a blind date. And so when somebody had mentioned about, oh, look at the cities continuing to respond to the needs of the population, it goes back to the 1930s even, that used to be the ice rink, and multiple people I know got married because of skating there. So thank you for all your work, and please keep the Human Relations Commission in mind as you continue to do your good work. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to address council at this time? And would you please state your name and municipality for the record?
Ann Henriksen, Zealand. Jesus said, "But whoever causes the downfall of one of these little ones who believes in me, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and were thrown to the depths of the sea." Holland has an anti-discrimination 2020 ordinance that includes sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression, initiated by Mayor Box and passed by the then sitting council. Some of the people here were the ones sitting here that passed it. The ordinance model was requested by the city manager and the city lawyer from the Michigan Anti-Discrimination Commission, directed by Attorney General Dana Nessel. The people of Holland who live here had no say in it. It was meant to protect all people for housing, employment, and accommodations. It was carefully fashioned to include punitive consequences, costing a citizen the need to get a lawyer and go to the Lansing courts in defense of himself for being accused of discrimination if another person should lose their job, housing, or unable to access any facility due to their sexual orientation. This sounds fair and right, but now it has gone too far. The pending fruit it is bearing now adversely affects our families and community. The new Michigan law in the making, misgendering, is signed into law by Governor Whitmer, will affect our schools and communities in a drastic way. The sponsors of the bill say it is to safeguard against threatening speech or hate speech, like intimidation or repeated harassment. This sounds good on the front end, but when we look to Canada, we see the same misgender laws are interpreted that pronouns are a fundamental part of a person's identity, and that the proper usage indicates that we see and respect a person for who they are or who they say they are. Especially for trans, non-binary, or other non-cisgender people, using the correct pronouns validates and affirms they are a person equally deserving respect and dignity. In actuality, it forces people to comply with what another says they are, but actually aren't. Our freedom of speech and religion is trampled, even if the City of Holland lawyer says that the 2020 ordinance protects it. So with the Michigan misgender law, a teacher who does not use the correct pronoun for an individual could be accused of harassing a student because the student feels it is a disrespectful threat. Put this pending law on top of sexual explicit materials available in our libraries and schools for children and special needs adult sex education. We have students and teachers exiting public education, leaving the underprivileged children behind to endure this. Those of you who have voted for this ordinance, did you ever think you were the ones to open the door to sexual indoctrination of the vulnerable ones in your community? Jesus said, "But whoever causes the downfall of one of these little ones who believes in me, it would be better for him if a heavy millstone were hung around his neck and were to drown in the depths of the sea." Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address council at this time? Seeing none, I will close the public comment period. Next item on our agenda, item 9, written petitions and communications. In addition to providing the opportunity for people to address council in person during our meetings, we do also have an email address if you're not able to make the meeting, and that is publiccomment@cityofholland.com, publiccomment@cityofholland.com. We collect those in between our regular meetings, and if we have any, which we do not tonight, we accept those into the record. We do not read them out loud, but the council members do read them as part of our packet. Next item on our agenda, item 12C1. 12A1, which is one of our items that was pulled from the consent agenda. Holland Board of Public Works, electric distribution easements for Washington Boulevard electric distribution construction. Mr. Van Peek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Welcome to our meeting, Ted Seiler from our Holland Board of Public Works. He'll describe this project here momentarily. I just want to point out once again, and this is a great opportunity to do it. I've worked in other communities that didn't have a local public works utility, particularly that handled electric utilities. And the fact that our partner here has money in the budget every year to underground the overhead power lines as an expense that we all share in those utilities is pretty amazing, knowing what I've seen the bills when we've inquired in other communities to underground those power lines, either for reliability purposes or aesthetic reasons. So thank you. It's great to have a partnership with the Board of Public Works as our sister internal agency, I guess. But Ted, why don't you I know the person that requested this might live in a particular neighborhood, so probably would like a little more information.
Sure. Thanks for having me. Good evening. Our Washington Boulevard, Washington Street / Washington Street project's been in the plans for a while now. If you remember, a few years ago, we did something very similar on Van Rolte. So we have primary electric running down, north-south down Washington Boulevard, Washington Street, and then every half block that comes, a low voltage comes off to distribution in the backyard neighborhoods, and then the drops serve the houses. So the project is to take that primary that's along Washington Boulevard and Washington Street, underground that. We brought some easements earlier to you for the houses that are gonna have transformers or other equipment. Because it's a boulevard, the right-of-way there is pretty skinny, so we've actually moved it into some folks' front yards, a corner of their front yards, really talking to them about what the best place would be, where it'd be less intrusive for them. And then these easements are for the overhead lines that run to the backyard from the street. We'll underground that, and those are mostly along property lines. So that overhead will go away on the street and then getting to the backyards. And then all you'll be left with from an overhead perspective is just a distribution in the backyards. This is end-of-life replacement, and when we look at some of these, we take into account reliability is a big thing, right? So when these are underground, those suicidal squirrels that decide they're gonna try to cause interruptions, any trees, storms, this is a much more reliable way. And it's become pretty cost effective. We're lucky that the soils in our area allow us to do this work pretty easily. So the price is pretty comparable when we look at a total replacement. And we take other things into account, but because it's a boulevard, it's a tulip lane, just the aesthetics too here will improve once we have that primary out of there. So any questions about that?
Ms. Raymond?
Yeah, how long does the entire project take, or how long does it take for one house?
Yeah, they can usually do a boring along a property line in a day. And they might be in the front when they're doing the primary undergrounding. And what we do is we bore and then we pull conduit in and then we put wire in that conduit. That could take 3 or 4 months for that whole stretch of Washington. But the property ones are a day or two to get those back to the backyards, and it's pretty quick. They'll come in, they'll bore, they'll pull the conduit. Later, they'll come pull the wire, and then our folks will come in and we'll actually do all the connections. And then we'll have to wreck out all the overhead as well. So that's another project that goes on.
I don't remember seeing, was there a timeline?
There wasn't a timeline. Okay. We're looking to start in late September, early October on this project.
Any other questions for staff? I just have one clarification, and that is, if, say, I or another typical homeowner in town wanted to underground our service, that typically would be a cost we would bear, right, as the customer?
If the customer will bear that cost to go underground.
Okay.
Yeah. So we own the overhead services. Customer will own underground service.
Okay, but in this instance, we're undergrounding to the individual customers
Correct.
as well.
No, just
the distribution.
Yep, the services will stay the same in the backyard as overhead.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
There might be a few that we've kind of made a deal with on an easement to underground their service as part of the project because that pole that served them is going away.
Okay.
But for the most part, everybody will stay the same.
Okay. All right, great. Any other questions for staff? Great. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks.
What is the pleasure of council in regard to this item?
So moved.
Moved by Corbin. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Aaronsource. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Freeman.
Yes.
Peters.
Yes.
Corbin.
Yes.
Coronado.
Yes.
Arnsworth.
Yes.
Hoekstra.
Yes.
Raymond.
Yes.
Byrd.
Yes.
Mayor Bucks.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you. Next item on our agenda, item 12C1, Melinda S. Heiberg, Declaration of Trust, Ottawa County Probate Court, case number 22-68430-TV. Mr. Van Beek.
I've never been complimented so much before. Don't tell him I said that, though. Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. We have a couple items with our returning, I think I called you our City Attorney Emeritus earlier, because it kind of fits, right, Ron? We have two items. This first one is the Heiberg Trust. And you'll recall that you took one action similar to what we're recommending tonight several months ago, maybe even last year. And then this was an item that's coming back after a presentation at closed session about a recommendation that Ron can give you a little bit more information about. And then, of course, we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. The background to this is that the Heiberg Trust provides for a gift to the city for use at the DeGraff Nature Center of 12.5% of the residue of the estate. And that amounts to about $1.4 million, just a little bit over that. The trust also provides for gifts to two grandchildren of $50,000 each. Well, it turns out by the time of her death, she had three grandchildren. The statute allows the trust to be amended. It's discretionary. Would allow the trust to be amended if it was determined that the omission of the third grandchild was unintentional. And so the trustee has filed a motion to amend the trust to add a bequest to the third grandchild of $50,000. That would have the effect of lowering the amount to the city by $6,250, 12.5% of that 50. And so two things need to happen for that to go forward. Well, one thing needs to happen, and that is the court needs to approve it. But in terms of your action here, there are two things that are coming before you. First thing is our office, Cunningham Dahlman PC, represents the trustee. And so that creates a conflict of interest. And so we're asking if the council would be willing to waive that conflict of interest. The second would be whether council wants to take any position on that request to allow the bequest for the third grandchild, in effect agreeing to lower the bequest to the city by $6,250,000. I said $6 million, $6,250. Need to get my eyes checked here. And so we prepared a motion that would accomplish both of those, waiving conflict of interest, and secondly, taking no position on the motion to add the bequest to the grandchild, if that's the pleasure of council. Be glad to answer any questions.
Yep. Any questions for staff?
Move to accept the recommendations as presented in 12C1.
Moved by Corbin. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Sol. Any discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Peters?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Sol?
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes?
Mayor Box?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great. Thank you. Next item, item 12C2, payment in lieu of taxes, pilot resolution, development agreement, and municipal services agreement for 717 East 24th Street. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. You will recall 717 East 24th Street is the address at the corner of Waverly and 24th. It's a project that has been before you and the Planning Commission for several years now. Home Flats is the apartment name. And it's a project that has been approved by the Planning Commission and was approved by you for a pilot, a payment in lieu of taxes, and an associated municipal services agreement back in 2022. Since that time, the project has gone through a couple other changes, and what's before you tonight is a recommendation to reflect those changes in the associated agreement, so it would be amended agreements. And then we are still working through some other items, but would hope that then this would be a project that would be approved by the pilots. The pilot and the MSA would be available for the developer to support this. Just as a reminder, had an update today where it's 201, 202 total units. About 20 of them would be at 40% area median income. 32 would be at about 50%. 48 would be at 60%. 62 would be at 70%, and then 40 would be at market rate. And we don't include all those numbers in our agreements, but they're kind of tie-barred, if you would, eventually with the submittal and the approval at the state for the LIHTC. So that's what's before you today. We still have some things to work through with the final submittal through the state, but we are recommending adoption of this. Ron, did I miss anything? I'm sure I did.
Well, just one thing. When you approved this before, there was a description of the property in the agreement, and now they've acquired another parcel, a small parcel adjacent to their original parcel, so we have a bigger description of the property there at the corner of 24th and Waverly. And that's reflected in the new agreement.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Hoekstra.
Yeah, just a clarification, Ron or Keith. What we're basically doing is aligning our agreement with the new description of the property, the numbers in terms of what we agreed on for the pilot and so forth. Those aren't changing. It's just we're reflecting the reality of the project.
Right. That's exactly right. There's a different name on the documents now. It's 24 East Limited Dividend Housing Association Limited Partnership. When these projects are built, it's typical to have one company acquire the property, build it out, and then transfer it over to a limited dividend housing association, because it has to be one of those type of companies for the tax credits. And that's reflected in these agreements too. They've set up the, for short, LDHA company, and the property would be acquired by that company instead of Magnus Capital.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do.
Yes,
So
Ms. Aaronshorst.
this didn't have to go through Planning Commission again because nothing else has changed?
Yeah, actually, I'm glad you answered that. Actually, this does reflect changes that did go back through Planning Commission for tweaks from the original site plan. So they had a site plan. You approved the first version of these documents, and then they went back and made some changes. Those needed to go back, get approved at Planning Commission. I think, did full Planning Commission approve them, or were those just administrative approvals by staff?
I think we did.
Okay. So then once those were done, then this action would be needed to make sure that everything is in agreement with the most recent Planning Commission approval.
Okay, thank you. And when they say screening criteria, screening or that's plant material or?
No,
what is
actually,
screening?
that would be the screening criteria, maybe not the best terminology,
Oh.
but it's common for applicants that are
I
applying
see.
to
Okay,
live
that kind of
at.
screen. Okay.
And Ron did a great job talking through. There was a time where, we really got into the details of that. And what this does is says we have their application process, their screening criteria, and then as council knows, we do have other ordinances and regulations and teeth available to us if we see any issues with screening processes. So Ron recommended, and I think it's good update to the language also that's reflected in this amended agreement.
Thank you. Good.
Any other questions for staff?
Motion to approve item 12-2 as presented.
Moved by Corbin, is there support?
Support.
Support by Sol. Any discussion? Mr. Corbin.
I just want to say I'm pleased, I'm glad to see that we have a really nice distribution of housing income levels for this subdivision. It's very pleasant to see that, so I'm glad that we were able to accomplish that with using this pilot program.
Any other discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Corbin,
Yes.
Sol,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Bird,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes?
Peters. Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next item, item 12E 4.1, broadband bonds. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We have two staff members out there that can help me answer any questions here. Lynn McCammon, of course, our finance director, is running point on selling these bonds. And Ted Seiler also is running point on the BPW of actually proceeding with Holland City Fiber. I'm going to let Lynn talk, but I know that one thing that we're excited about with these recommended broadband bonds in the process is there's three things in particular that we're, I would say, what do they usually say, on time and under budget? There's three things in this recommendation that are improved upon what the voters had suggested and gave us approval for to move forward with the Holland City Fiber project. And I bet those will come up in presentation or questions or discussion.
Good evening, Mayor Box and members of City Council. This evening, included in your packet was a resolution authorizing unlimited tax general obligation bonds, Series 2023, for the broadband project in an amount not to exceed $23 million. So just a little bit of history as a reminder. In August of 2022, last year, the citizens of Holland authorized the issuance of unlimited tax bonds in an amount not to exceed $30 million for a term of 25 years. So here's two of the good news. We are first asking for, this first issuance is going to be an amount not to exceed $23 million because the project costs are in line with the original estimates. We had put a little cushion because we remember inflation has been impacting a lot of our projects at the city and for the Board of Public Works. So that's good news, first good news. And then we had said 25 years because 30 million, we might needed to go to 25 years because we were again trying to keep that millage impact at 1.5 mils or less. So that's the good news number 2 and 3. The first one we're proposing is 20 years because we're allowed to, we're able to have that smaller amount. And what we're looking at a mill estimate for that would be nothing that was higher than 1.2 mils. So those are the three pieces of good news. I think I got those right. So where we're at in the process now is the project is underway and we have some estimates on the amount we need. That's how we could get to the amount we need. And so this is going to be a bond that is going to be, we're going to have the next steps after this, if this is authorized, would be to have the ratings call in September, where we have to get a rating every time we go for one of these issuances. And then we would hope to have a competitive sale. That means we're going to put it out to the market to try to get the best rate that we can, because any money we save, of course, is good news as well. And so that would be looking about the October 3rd or 4th date. And then with a closing date in the end of October, which would bring it right in time to fund for the project where they need the cash flow. So that is what is before you this evening. And there may, just so you, if you read, it said this is the first issuance. We may have a smaller issuance come up when we get the final cost, because it's really hard to tell because all these projects have contingencies. So we've planned for that too. In the event we need a little bit extra money, we're hoping that can be done more in a direct placement type of issue, where we've had luck with the board especially has used this mechanism in the past, where we've been able to negotiate it with maybe a local bank and get a much better rate on that issuance and have the flexibility to maybe even make an earlier call on that. So again, we're trying to work hard with citizens' money to get the best deal we can. That's good for the finance, but I'm sure Ted would like to talk a little bit about maybe where the project stands.
Sure. Good evening again. So last time we talked at a study session, we had just gotten EX Squared on board as the design build firm that's helping us design and build the network. We're in that high level design phase now. So that's part of the challenge with when we did the bid, we actually, in order to do an apples to apples comparison on all the bidders, we actually told them based on another high level design that CTC had done for us, this is what we want you to bid on. Remember, there's two pieces. The design was a fixed price. That's not going to change. And then we said, hey, bid on if we did this, and we gave them how many of things and how many miles we were going to do, and overhead and underground. And so that's the number that could change. So that's when we talk about, we really don't know on a 2 or 3 year project where we're going to end up. It's kind of hard to nail down at this point, which is why the proposed way to form the bonds to be able to pay for the project.
Great, thank you. Questions from council? Ms. Aaronsource?
I remember, didn't the BPW start buying up cable and those kinds of things early on because you didn't know, so that was to your advantage too?
So that's been a really good process, and it came in about of what we thought based on the bids that we received for the rest of the project. That's where those ARPA funds that you had approved for the project are going to. So that 4.2 million, 2 million of that is for those materials, and then the other 2.2 million we'll use on the engineering and design portion, and then the construction will most of that bond will pay for the construction.
Good, thanks.
Other questions for staff? I have a couple. One has to do with, okay, so we're looking at now 23 million rather than 30 million. We're looking at 20 years versus 25 years. And we're looking at potentially 1.2 mils rather than 1.5 mils. I'm guessing you've run some numbers on what kind of savings that might look like, or not? I know I can't figure that out. I figured you might be able to.
Not yet, because we want to wait till we get that final. The reason it's a little
Okay.
difficult is because we have to get to that final number when
What
we
the
get
actual-
to
what the
the
actual
interest
number-
rate, because the markets are right. The markets are fluctuating, as we know.
All right, so let
But-
me ask you a follow-up question, which is, well, yeah, it's at least 7 million, at least 7 million, and 5 years of interest that we're not paying, and maybe 0.3 of a mil. So I'll rephrase my question. When you know that number, would you please come back to us and let us know what that number is?
Yes, October.
Compared to what we thought it was gonna be?
We'll give you,
Okay.
we'll give you an update when we sell the bond so that we have all the information.
We have all that information. Okay, great. Yeah, I'd like that comparison number too, because I think that'd be really helpful to have. And then the city manager mentioned 3 benefits of this. There's a 4th one. It was a year ago that the millage passed. Could we have sold the bonds a year ago and started having that show up on people's property tax bills right away?
Yes, that is correct. So we actually, that is the 4th good news. This will not be until next year's tax bill is when the millage will show up. And when I say 1.2, that is, as a reminder too, that's the highest it'll be. It'll continue to go down.
So
over the
starts
life
at
of
1.2
of the debt.
and trails
Yes,
off?
it goes down, yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's really important for the people of Holland to know that we had the opportunity, if we had chosen to start putting that on folks' tax bills right away, sell those bonds right away. But this council worked and staff worked really hard to try to push that back as close to when folks might get that service turned on as we possibly could. Because I know my neighbors are gonna say, hey, my taxes went up to pay for that fiber system and it's not turned on at my house yet. And so I wanted to make sure that people understood that point as well, that we have pushed that back as far as we possibly can by
Yes.
using those ARPA funds.
Right, and that's it. The ARPA funds was really instrumental in that effort.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? Ms. Soul?
Thank you. So question about the contingency. So is the contingency based on maybe the cost of the time, or is the contingency based on the rates of the bond? When you say we have to plan for
So the
contingencies?
contingency is really on the project
The
itself.
project,
Mhm.
okay. So
Yep.
give or take, depending on the price of,
Yeah, it's just hard to know until the final design is done, and even then, there could be change orders, things in the field change, construction, they run into something that they didn't plan for. A good example is when we did the transmission main on Lakewood last year, we were able to structure the bond such that it could also pay for other water main projects. So we didn't have to worry about coming in really close to that project cost. And we were actually under budget on that, which allowed the bond proceeds to cover another project. We don't have that luxury here. So the purpose of the 2 bond offerings is try to nail down that price as much as possible. And then with the early call, if we do come in under budget, we can then use those proceeds to help pay that early call and reduce the interest expense. So that's the contingency that we're talking about.
And that's when we would go with the local bank, is that what you're saying with the?
Right, we would have that option, when we call it a negotiated, so we would have our direct placement, we'd have the option on those smaller bonds to do something like that, because you can get a little more customized type of issuance and have it, those special features that Ted was talking about.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Freeman.
Just one question for Pat. Are we had done any installation at this point, or is it all still in the planning and?
No, we're still
Okay.
at that high-level design phase. EX Squared actually was here this week, walking down some of the first, we're calling them fiber hoods. So one of the first fiber hoods that we're gonna do. It's because it's early, probably the first 2 or 3, there's gonna be a little learning from them and us. But after that, they're gonna know more what to expect and what we have to offer from existing fiber or conduit or the things like that. So the schedule right now shows breaking ground in like late November, December for actual construction.
Sure. There's the township is doing construction, street construction and stuff on 8th Street, like by Russ's going to
Yes.
through, and I'm like,
Yes.
oh, ooh.
No.
And I can forget that now.
Any other questions? I have one follow-up in regard to the early call, because I want to make sure people understand this as well. It gives us the opportunity, if we have the funds available, to pay those bonds off earlier, correct? Saving interest. We did that with the Holland Energy Park, is that correct?
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, what was I know these are not apples to apples, but there's a number that always bounces around in my head. We paid off the Holland Energy Park early, because of an early call, and saved, my recollection is about $40 million in interest.
That's my recollection as well.
Okay, so there's that opportunity, and I like to point that out to folks, that the staff here does a stellar job of managing the taxpayers' dollars, and this is just the idea of having the opportunity for that early call, and I can see if the system, we've done a lot of the estimates based on about a 50% take rate.
Yes.
So if we've got a higher take rate than that, and we have more money coming in, we could potentially have the ability to pay off some of this early. Yes?
Two different
Okay.
discussions.
Okay, all right. I don't want to conflate those two. All right.
The
I just want to
higher
make sure
take
people
rate-
knew we had the opportunity for some
Yeah.
potential additional savings down the line
The
as well.
higher take rate would equal more savings because the cost of the service, the monthly cost of the service would go down.
All right,
Yep.
great. Thank you. Appreciate that. All right. Any other questions from staff members, or for staff members? None. All right. What is the pleasure of council in regard to this item? Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Move we adopt the recommended resolution.
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support. Oh.
Support by Byrd. Any discussion? Mr. Hoekstra.
Yeah, one comment. I've had several discussions both prior to and after the millage vote. Whenever you start talking about things that affect people's taxes, they start paying attention. And some of those concerns were, how is this going to affect my tax rate? Nobody wants that really to go up. But if you go to the BPW website, fiber website, there's a cool little tool on there that you can use to calculate what the effect might be on your taxes. You can put in, I think it's a taxable value, right? And put that in, plug it in, and it magically gives you a number back. I did that, and I was really astounded at how low the rate was. And those numbers may be actually skewed to the high side, given the good news that we've heard tonight. So if anyone's interested in that, I would advise them, ask them to go to that website and check it out. And I think a lot of people will be surprised at how low that impact of that's going to be on their tax bill.
Great. Thank you for pointing that out, Dave. I didn't know that was out there.
Oh, it's cool.
Yeah. Through the magic of math. Any other discussion? Seeing none. Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Sol,
Yes.
Arnshorst?
Yes.
Hoekstra?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Byrd?
Yes.
Freeman?
Yes?
Peters?
Yes.
Corbin?
Yes.
Mayor Bucks?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item, 12E 6.1, gifts. Kathy, would you please review the gifts for us?
The city manager's office is pleased to report the following gifts: Public Safety Services, Police Operations, Officers Joe Soto and Jeff Klein retirement gifts, Holland Police Officers Association, $857. It is recommended that these donations be accepted with appreciation, credited to the appropriate account, and an expression of gratitude be forwarded to said donors.
Great, thank you. What is the pleasure of council in regard to the gifts?
Move to approve said gifts with a token of our appreciation.
Moved by Sol, is there support?
Support.
Support by Vreeman. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Next item on the agenda, item 12E 6.3, and that is that our ice rink? Thank you, Mr. Corbin. Yeah, Management Administrative Services, approval of ice rink soil stabilization engineering proposal. That was our second item that came off consent. Mr. Van Beek.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Councilwoman Raymond, I think also communicated she'd like to hear, and I know all of us are getting a lot of questions, eager to find out how things are progressing with the ice rink. You know, as we just heard about kind of the process of Holland City Fiber, even though it was approved a long time ago in concept, you have to do all the detailed engineering to get to the point where you actually know that you can proceed with the project. And I would say that this applies to this proposal before you tonight. It's not been a secret that the location that we've chosen for this ice rink is not exactly in just, you know, this never been touched except for farming, you know, green field out in the middle of nowhere. It's right in the heart of our downtown that has had some interesting history in it with not only our former town dump site, but to make it more interesting, it was our dredge disposal site on top of that. So we've known all the way along that it's an interesting site. We've done the work ahead of time to make sure with Eagle, the former state DEQ, and also with the Federal Army Corps of Engineers that were authorized and approved to do this work on this site. It was just, we needed to figure out what exactly we needed to do underground to make sure that we could build this in the proper way. We were hoping, and we were working with our primary architect, GMB Architects, but also with our construction manager. We always like to do that because you like to have the person that designs it working with the person that is going to build it. You usually get better projects that way. But we've really gotten to the point where we've got good estimates of cost on everything, but we really wanted to improve and tighten up what are we going to encounter, and what does the design of what we need to do to make sure that site is stable for what we're building out there. So the proposal in front of you cements basically a proposal with soils and structures and soils. I sometimes get that mixed up, but it's really the company that we use for all similar type things for our transportation projects, and local company does great work and is very familiar with GMB. So what they would do is really finalize that last part of the project and the engineering that we really need to know. And then the plan would be, if I could just move forward, the plan would be once we get that piece of information, then that's the final piece of information that we're looking that really gets us to a probable estimate of cost. You'll recall when Mr. Van Dyken is here, he always likes to double, triple, quadruple remind everybody of how these processes work. You start high up on the funnel and you kind of go, I think it's going to cost this much, but who knows? And if you're building, a residential house of certain square foot, you're probably going to be pretty close. Well, guess what? Building an outdoor ice rink, it's not like there's a ton of them that we can go and say, oh yeah, we know exactly what this is going to cost. So what's going to happen is, should you approve this tonight, they will, as expeditiously as possible, get this work done. So not only do we have an improved estimate of costs that we can match with everything else, but then we would bring that back to you in a final recommendation that you would then need to approve or not, that would allow us to put it out for bid and keep this project in that sense moving forward. So I hope that answered your questions, Lynn. And I think we know I can't go anywhere with right now without people asking what's going on with the ice rink. And we're very eager to get it started also. But as Matt always says, we're going to do it right. And now's not the time to hurry through a process. We're going to make sure that we get it right. The last thing we want to do is open it up and then have, unexpected problems a year or two in. So this is an important step in the process.
Any questions for staff? What is the pleasure of council in regard to this item?
Move that we approve the soil stabilization engineering proposal with soils and structures.
Moved by Aaron Source. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Sol. Any discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Aaronshorst,
Yes.
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Bird,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Peters, Corbin, Sol,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Next item, item 13, communications from the city manager. Mr. Van Beek,
How much time do I have?
as much as you want. You got a wedding coming up later in the week, so you want to wrap it up before that happens.
It's been quite a week. I have several things, but I promise they will all go fast. One, study session next week. We're not quite ready on some of the other items. I know I always put out communications. We're looking to do the continuation of the conversation about the Civic Center place next week, Wednesday. Two, tonight, I was impressed that Captain Tinney was here because actually as we sit here, in cooperation with Ottawa County Emergency Management and a lot of our other public safety providers throughout the county, they are doing a mass casualty exercise at Windmill Island Gardens. So if you hear questions about that, we definitely did, in association with the county, put out a lot of communications about that. But great example of being out there and doing that good work. Three, I'll put out more information when I do another communication from the city manager, but kudos to our assessing department. Periodically, the state does a state tax commission audit of our assessing processes and information, and we secured a perfect score, which is not just easy to do. So another reflection of a great department doing good work. And again, I'll share more information about that moving forward. Next, I know that a lot of people have heard about, and it really reflects the processes that you all approved in our Unified Development Ordinance about, in particular, larger projects in the community, where what we do with those projects is before that they formally go before public hearings at the Planning Commission and then even are voted upon at the Planning Commission, much less before they get to you, we require entities to have community and neighborhood meetings about projects that they're looking to have. And I'm sure this will be publicized more, but Hope College is in the design process for a new building on their campus, specifically at the space at 124 and 126 East 8th Street. I think all of you would be familiar with that, and there's different well-known community names for that property. And they are going to have, again, as required in the process that you've set forward before it even comes to the Planning Commission, the public is invited to an information session on Wednesday, September 6th at 4 o'clock at the DeVos Fieldhouse. So I just thought that was neat that they sent that out to us, and I'm sure that will be further advertised in the community. And I'm guessing it'll garner some interest, which I think is great. You'll also see more information. Fantastic. Our public services crew, they have a lot of fun, and they like to rib each other about this. We have an annual, it's called the Battle of the Badges softball game. Fire versus police. And I know fire You know, they didn't say too much about it, but they had to fight back, and they won after getting beat pretty good a couple years before. So Fire is now the holder of the trophy. So if you're interested in seeing that, that is on Saturday at 10 o'clock at the Matt Urban Sportsplex. It's always fun to be out there. I have a wedding that day, so I'm not going to make it. But just a great cause, and always impressed, too, that they do it for a lot of good reasons, right? But I think the best reason is they always raise money for a local nonprofit and are very pleased and happy to donate that to a good cause. And then finally, I have other things to hand out for you, but I know they're sitting up on my desk. Cinca did a fantastic job. I think a lot of you tend to really appreciate that we have these business side, two-sided cards that fit, at least in gentlemen's wallets, I know, that have a lot of information about the budget and other information about the city. And we have a whole stack of those available. So after the meeting, I'll run up and get those, and you are welcome to have one or more, and we'll distribute those to you. Scott, you only get 2. Yeah, well, you can hand them out to friends and family, and yeah. So, yes, I said I had many items, but I'd go quick. I think I did pretty well. Thank you.
That was just a little over 5 minutes. That was pretty impressive. I have a couple of items, and then I have a couple of appointments tonight. The opportunity to participate in 2 different concerts in Collin Park, one on Saturday night, one last night. No, they did not let me perform. I got to do a welcome and lead the Pledge of Allegiance, but Holland Symphony Orchestra had an absolutely amazing concert on Saturday night in Collin Park. It was called Music Unites Us. It was not only the symphony, but a number of international artists. There was a gentleman from Uganda that was playing an instrument of his own making. It looked like a harp, and the strings were actually fish line, and it was one of the most beautiful instruments I've ever heard. They also had a gentleman who is the winner of the Vietnamese version of the TV show The Voice. And he was in traditional Vietnamese costume, and I thought to myself, well, he's going to have a really staid kind of a thing based on the way he's dressed. He was an incredible performer, engaged that audience. I thought I was in Las Vegas, frankly, when he was performing with the orchestra. Just did a stellar job. And of course, our wonderful Holland Symphony Orchestra musicians just sounded fabulous. And then last night was the last of the season of the American Legion Band concerts, again in Collin Park. A great night, thousands of people showing up week after week for those concerts. And it's a good thing that it ended last night, because the sun just sunk below the horizon just as they finished the last bit of music last night. So great event. Sorry that they're done for the summer season, but we're looking forward to next year as well. And now I have 2 appointments. I am recommending that the City Council approve the appointments of Priscilla Lopez to the Neighborhood Improvement Committee with a term expiring June 30 of 2026, and Patrick P.J. Thompson to the Holland Energy Fund with a term expiring June 30, 2024. And that is a recommendation that I would appreciate a motion from the board.
Move to approve?
Moved by Hoekstra. Is there support?
Support.
Support by Sol. Any discussion? Seeing none, Kathy, would you please call the roll?
Hoekstra,
Yes.
Raymond,
Yes.
Byrd,
Yes.
Freeman,
Yes.
Peters. Corbin,
Yes.
Sol,
Yes.
Arnshorst,
Yes.
Mayor Box.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Great, thank you. Any appointments, motions, communications from council members? Ms. Sol?
Yes, just to let the record reflect, I did have a name change, so if anyone in the audience is confused, it's no longer Belinda Coronado, it is now Belinda Sol. So may the record reflect that our team is working on it, Kathy and Cinca and the IT team, so thank you, and those changes will reflect as soon as we can get all that stuff straightened out, so thanks.
Great, thank you. Mr. Corbin?
Just a question for the city manager. When are we anticipating the master plan to come before us in a first or second reading? When do we anticipate that?
It took me a while to learn this, but I would only be guessing, so I'm not going
All
to
right.
guess.
I think are we in a 60 or 90-day comment period right now?
Yeah, I mean, there's the comment period. I don't think anything, unless something would be recommended, would go to planning commission. So I think after the comment period, then staff would gather any comments or anything and would bring it forward. But
Okay.
I'd only be guessing, Scott, so
All right,
I
thank you very
apologize.
much. Appreciate it.
Any other communications from council members? Seeing none, and we do not have any first readings of ordinances, there's one more motion I would entertain at this moment.
Motion to adjourn.
Moved by Vreeman, is there support?
Support.
Support by Sol. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned. Thank you all.